I thought my husband was my safe place, my forever, until I met him. One look, one touch, and suddenly, everything I built, my marriage, my family, felt like a lie. I swore I'd never cross that line, but secrets have a way of slipping through the cracks. And when the truth finally came out, the damage was beyond repair. If I could turn back time, would I still make the same choice? I was never the kind of woman who dreamed of a perfect fairy tale romance. I wanted stability, a partner I could rely on, someone who wouldn't leave when things got tough. That's exactly what I thought I had with James. James wasn't the most exciting guy in the room, but he was dependable. He had this quiet charm, the kind of man who would remember how I took my coffee and always check if my car tires needed air before winter. We met in college, and while our love story wasn't explosive, it felt safe. Within 2 years, we were married. At first, life was simple and sweet. We lived in a small, cozy apartment, saving up for a house while James worked his way up in his engineering job. I worked as a marketing assistant at a mid-sized firm, not my dream job, but it paid the bills. We had inside jokes, late-night drives, and Sunday morning pancakes. It was enough, or so I thought. Then came the responsibilities, the mortgage, the long work hours, the quiet sacrifices. James was a good man, a hardworking provider, but over the years something changed. He became tired, distracted. His job started demanding more, and I started feeling like an afterthought. Dinners turned into silent meals in front of the TV. Intimate conversations became quick. How was your day? Check-ins before bed. He was still there physically, but emotionally, he was slipping away, and I didn't know how to reach him anymore. I told myself this was just how marriage worked. The honeymoon phase fades and routine takes over. But deep down, a part of me started craving something more: excitement, passion, a reminder that I was still desirable. I tried to brush those feelings aside, bury them under work and daily responsibilities. But then Nathan walked into my life. Nathan was everything James wasn't: spontaneous, charming, a man who carried himself with an effortless confidence that made everyone around him take notice. He didn't just see me, he studied me. He asked questions James had stopped asking years ago. And before I even realized it, I was standing at the edge of a dangerous line, questioning everything I thought I wanted. At first, it was innocent, or at least that's what I told myself. Nathan came into my life like a spark in the darkness, bringing energy into my otherwise predictable world. He was a business consultant who occasionally worked with my firm, and from the moment we met, I felt it, the undeniable pull. He was charming in a way that felt effortless, always knowing the right thing to say, always making me laugh in a way I hadn't in years. I convinced myself it was harmless. After all, a little attention never hurt anyone, right? But deep down, I knew the truth: this wasn't just attention, it was temptation. James, on the other hand, was as oblivious as ever. He had been coming home later and later, drained from work, barely noticing when I started dressing up a little more, putting in extra effort with my makeup. When he did notice, he'd smile and say, "You look nice today, babe." And that was it. No passion, no curiosity, just a passing compliment before he went back to his emails. Nathan, however, noticed everything. "You always wear blue when you're in a good mood," he said one afternoon, catching me off guard. "How do you know that?" I asked, a little stunned. "I pay attention," he said simply, flashing that confident smile. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. He made me feel seen, wanted. James used to be that way, back when we were younger, back when we still had endless things to talk about. But now I was just part of his routine, a fixture in his life that he assumed would always be there. Then came the secrets. It started small. I found myself hiding my phone screen when I got a message from Nathan. I deleted conversations, even though they weren't explicitly inappropriate yet. When James asked who I was texting, I'd lie without thinking. Just work stuff. The guilt should have been eating me alive. But it was. If anything, I felt alive for the first time in years. Then James started noticing. "You've been working late a lot lately," he said one night, his eyes studying me across the dinner table. "Yeah, there's a big project coming up," I lied smoothly, barely meeting his gaze. He nodded, but something in his expression changed. A flicker of doubt. A few days later, I caught him looking at me differently, Not with anger, but with something worse: uncertainty. Like he was trying to put the pieces together but couldn't quite make them fit. Then one night he tried. "Hey, do you want to go away for the weekend? Just the two of us. I know things have been a little off lately." His voice was hesitant, like he already expected me to say no. And he was right. "I have to work," I answered, not even bothering to make up a better excuse. I saw the way his shoulders slumped, the way his jaw clenched slightly before he nodded. That should have been my wake-up call. That should have been the moment I realized what I was doing. Instead, I found myself reaching for my phone the second he left the room, texting Nathan. "Drinks after work tomorrow." His reply came instantly. "Thought you never ask." The first time it happened, I told myself it was just one night, one mistake. Nathan and I had been meeting for drinks after work for weeks, always towing the line, flirting just enough to make my heart race, but never crossing into something I couldn't take back. But that night, something felt different. I showed up at the bar in a dress I hadn't worn in years, something short, something that made me feel desirable. I told myself it was for me, but I knew better. I wanted Nathan to notice. And when his eyes ran over me, dark with something dangerous, I knew exactly what I was doing. "You look incredible," he murmured, his voice low and full of meaning. I smiled, sipping my wine, pretending I didn't feel my pulse pounding in my throat. The conversation was easy, effortless. We laughed, we shared secrets, we talked about dreams that felt long abandoned. I hadn't felt that alive in years. Then, as we were leaving, it happened. It started as an innocent goodbye, a hand on my arm, a moment too long. But then his fingers slid down, lacing through mine, and before I could even think to stop it, he pulled me closer. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his breath warm against my skin. I should have. I should have pulled away, gone home to my husband, pretended none of this had ever happened. Instead, I leaned in. His lips met mine in a kiss that sent a shockwave through my entire body. It wasn't soft, it wasn't hesitant. It was hungry, urgent, like he had been waiting for this just as long as I had. When we finally pulled apart, my head was spinning. "This is wrong," I whispered, but my voice lacked conviction. Nathan smirked, brushing a thumb against my lips. "Then why does it feel so right?" I didn't answer, I didn't need to. That night, I told James I was working late. I went to Nathan's place instead. The affair started slowly, but it didn't take long before I was in too deep. I became addicted to Nathan, the way he looked at me, the way he made me feel like the most important person in the room. With him, I wasn't just a wife, a woman waiting for her husband to notice her. I was desirable, exciting, wanted. I started dressing differently, wearing perfume James had never smelled before. I spent more time on my hair, my makeup. I became someone new, someone reckless, someone who had something to lose. And James noticed. "You've been different lately," he said one night as we sat on the couch. "Different how?" I asked, keeping my tone light. He hesitated, like he was searching for the right words. "I don't know, distracted I guess, like you're here but you're not." I forced a smile, leaning in to kiss him. "I've just been stressed with work, that's all." He nodded, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Then the guilt started creeping in. One morning, as James kissed me goodbye before leaving for work, I caught myself staring at him. He had no idea. He trusted me completely. It should have made me stop. It should have made me realize that I was gambling with a man who had done nothing but love me. But it didn't. Because that same afternoon, I was in Nathan's arms again, letting him undo everything James and I had built together. Then came the close calls. James started asking questions, coming home early unexpectedly. One night, as I was in the shower, my phone lit up on the nightstand, Nathan's name flashing across the screen. James picked it up. "Who's Nathan?" My stomach dropped. I forced a laugh, reaching for the phone. "Just a client from work, he's been a pain lately." James stared at me for a second too long, then nodded. "You've been getting a lot of late-night texts from work lately." I smiled, pressing a kiss to his cheek. That's corporate life, babe. And just like that, he let it go. But I knew it was only a matter of time before he wouldn't. Nathan started pushing me. How much longer are you going to keep this up? He asked one night, his hands gripping my waist. I want more than stolen nights and secrets. I can't just leave, I whispered, though part of me knew that wasn't true. Why not? You don't love him anymore, you love me. His words made my heart pound. Did I? Was this love, or was it just the thrill of the forbidden? I didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing for certain: James was starting to figure it out. And when the truth finally came out, none of us would ever be the same. The night everything fell apart, I never saw it coming. By then, the affair with Nathan had become routine. We had our secret places, our carefully planned rendezvous. I had mastered the art of lying, convincing James that my late nights were just work obligations, and that my distance was due to stress. But James wasn't stupid. I should have known he was watching, piecing things together like a puzzle. I should have noticed the way his eyes lingered on me longer, the moments he started asking questions that felt too specific. But I didn't, because I was too wrapped up in my fantasy, too convinced that I had complete control over the situation. Then came the text message, the one I never should have sent. Nathan, I miss you. I need to see you. Meet tonight, usual place, 7 p.m. Only I hadn't sent it to Nathan. I had sent it to James. The moment I saw his name on my screen, my blood turned to ice. I wanted to grab the phone, to delete the message before he saw it, but it was too late. I heard the vibration from the kitchen where James was standing, his back to me as he reached for his phone. I held my breath as he read the message. Seconds felt like hours. Then he turned around. His face was unreadable calm, too calm. He didn't say anything at first, just set his phone down on the counter, staring at me like he was looking at a stranger. Who's Nathan? His voice was eerily quiet. My heart pounded so hard I thought he could hear it. I scrambled for a lie, but I knew this was it. This was the moment I had been dreading, the moment I had convinced myself would never come. It's not what you think, I started, but my voice cracked. Oh, James let out a humorless laugh. So you weren't planning to meet him tonight at 7, at your usual place? I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. He knew. How long? His voice was still calm, but his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. James, please. How's long? Tears burned in my eyes. Lying was pointless. He deserved the truth. A few months. My voice was barely above a whisper. He exhaled sharply, like I had just punched the air out of his lungs. Then he laughed again, short, bitter. Months, he repeated, shaking his head. Jesus Christ. He walked away, out the door, out of our home, leaving me standing there with nothing but the wreckage of what I had done. James didn't come home that night. Or the next. I called him, but he didn't answer. I texted, but he left me on read. And then, on the third night, he finally responded, with a single message. We need to talk. I met him at the house. He was sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of papers in front of him. My stomach churned. I already knew what they were. Divorce papers, I whispered. He looked up at me, exhaustion lining his face. What did you expect, Emily? His voice wasn't angry anymore, just tired. I blinked back tears. James, please, we can fix this. He let out a long breath, rubbing his temple like he was fighting off a headache. Fix it, he repeated. You want to fix it, after you've been sneaking around behind my back for months. I swallowed hard. It was a mistake. He slammed his fist against the table, the sound echoing through the room. Don't you dare call this a mistake, he snapped. A mistake is one night, one moment of weakness. What you did, that was a choice, over and over again. Silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I didn't want this to happen, I whispered. But it did, he said simply. I wiped my tears away, my mind grasping at straws. What about our family, our life together? Are you just going to throw it all away? James stared at me for a long moment. Then, he shook his head. I didn't throw anything away, Emily, you did. His words hit harder than a slap. Is there someone else? I asked, my voice small. He let out a short, humorless laugh. No, and that's the difference between us, isn't it? The next day, he moved out. A week later, he filed for divorce. And just like that, everything I had taken for granted was gone. But karma wasn't done with me yet. 2 weeks later, I found out that Nathan had moved on. I showed up at his place one night, desperate for something familiar, for a reminder that I hadn't ruined my life for nothing. But when I knocked on the door, a woman answered. A younger woman. She looked at me with barely concealed amusement, like she already knew exactly who I was. Can I help you? She asked, her voice dripping with fake politeness. Nathan appeared behind her, dressed casually, a lazy smirk on his face. Emily, he said, almost like he was amused. I stared at him, disbelief and humiliation swirling in my chest. Who is she? I asked, though deep down I already knew. Nathan just shrugged. You didn't think you were the only one, did you? And just like that, it hit me. I had destroyed my marriage for a man who never planned to stay. Nathan was never my future, he was just a temporary escape. And now I had nothing. That night, I sat in the apartment I once shared with James, staring at the empty space where our life used to be. I had spent months lying, manipulating, convincing myself that James was the problem, that I was the victim. But the truth was simple. I was the villain in my own story. And for the first time, I had to face the devastating cost of my choices. I used to think that losing James would be liberating, that I'd step into a new life, free from the dullness of routine, ready to embrace excitement and passion. But freedom felt a lot like loneliness. The silence in my apartment was deafening. No sound of James's keys jingling at the door, no faint hum of his late-night work emails, just emptiness. For the first time, I truly realized I had lost everything. James didn't yell when he left. He didn't demand explanations or throw accusations at me. He just walked away, like a man who had nothing left to fight for. And somehow, that hurt more than if he had screamed at me. For weeks, I tried to convince myself I was better off. Nathan was out of the picture, but surely I could start fresh. A new life, a new version of me. But reality was cruel. Losing James. I didn't expect James to thrive without me. At first, I thought he'd struggle, that the pain of my betrayal would weigh him down, make him miserable. But James wasn't the same man I had walked all over for months. He grew stronger. He hit the gym, got a promotion, started reconnecting with friends. He became the version of himself I always claimed I wanted. And the worst part, he did it without me. Our friends, the ones who used to adore me, chose him. They saw what I had done, the way I had torn him down, and they never forgave me for it. At first, they were polite. A quick nod in the grocery store, a forced smile at social events. But eventually, they stopped acknowledging me altogether. Even my own family struggled to look at me the same way. You had a good man, Emily, my sister told me one day, and you threw him away for what? A thrill. I had no answer. Losing my child. But the hardest part, the real punishment, was losing my son. James never poisoned him against me. He never spoke badly about me. But he didn't have to. Our child saw everything. He saw the late nights, the whispered phone calls, the days I came home smelling like another man's cologne. And when the truth came out, he changed. At first, it was subtle. Less excitement when I picked him up, shorter responses to my questions. Then, the distance grew. Can I stay with Dad this weekend? He started asking more often. Of course, sweetheart, I'd say, pretending like it didn't break me every time. But one day, he stopped asking, he just stayed. James never kept him from me, but he didn't force him to spend time with me either. And slowly, my own child began seeing me as the woman who broke his father. The day I realized I had truly lost him was when he called me Emily instead of Mom. I cried for hours, but what was I supposed to say? Come back, forget what I did. Pretend I didn't destroy the only real home you've ever known. There was no taking it back. The ultimate betrayal. Then came the final blow. I thought I had hit rock bottom, but life had one more cruel twist for me. James met someone new. I saw them together once, him and a woman who looked nothing like me. She was soft-spoken, kind, the type of person who radiated warmth. I watched them from across the street, the way she laughed at something he said, the way he looked at her, the way he used to look at me. For months, I had convinced myself that James would always love me deep down, that, no matter what, I was the love of his life. But watching him with her, I knew the truth. James was over me. And I had no one to blame but myself. Reality check. So here I am now, alone. The woman who thought she was trading up. The woman who left her family for a fantasy. I lost my marriage, my child, my home, my respect, my future, all for a man who never even planned to stay. And the irony. James is happier than ever. He has his life back, his confidence, his son, his future. And me. I'm just a lesson, a cautionary tale whispered among friends, a reminder that some mistakes can never be undone. People like to say, everything happens for a reason. That life will always give you second chances, that mistakes are just part of the journey. But some mistakes, they don't come with a reset button. I used to think that I was the victim, that James was the problem, that our marriage had become stale because he let it. I convinced myself that I was justified in looking for excitement elsewhere, that I deserved more. But now I see the truth. I wasn't trapped in a loveless marriage, I wasn't neglected, I was just selfish. James was a good man, a faithful man, a man who worked hard to provide, who never once strayed, who loved me completely, even when I had already given up on him. And I threw him away. For what? A fantasy, a thrill, a man who in the end never wanted me the way James did. I wish I could go back. I wish I could tell myself to fight for my marriage instead of looking for an escape. To appreciate the little things, James making me coffee in the mornings, fixing things around the house without being asked, pulling me closer in his sleep even when he was too tired to say the words. Those moments were real. Nathan, he was just an illusion, a distraction from the real work that love requires. Because that's the truth no one tells you, love isn't always exciting. It isn't always fireworks and stolen kisses in the dark. Sometimes, love is choosing someone every single day, even when it's hard, even when the passion dims and life gets messy. And I failed at that. James has moved on now. He has a new life, a new love, a new future. And I am a woman who lost everything. My son, once my little boy who looked at me with adoration, now sees me with disappointment. He doesn't trust me, and I don't know if he ever will again. My family, my friends, they see the real me now, not the woman who found herself, but the woman who destroyed everything good she had. And the hardest part. I have to live with this. There is no fixing what I've done, no getting James back, no undoing the hurt I caused. All I can do now is face the consequences of my choices and hope, pray, that one day, I will be something more than just a cautionary tale. If you were in my shoes, would you have made the same choices? Or would you have fought for the love you had? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories that reveal the shocking truths behind love, betrayal, and regret, subscribe now. You won't believe what's coming next.